That's great. Thank you. Well, good evening all. Welcome to today's meeting. This is a meeting of Caerphilly Council's Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee held on the 28th of September 2021. This meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the website at caerphilly.gov.uk. Moving on to our agenda for this evening, item 1 is to receive apologies for absence. Do we have apologies, Mark, please?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Aldworth, Councillor Christine Forehead and Councillor Elaine Forehead.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If I could just apologise for having missed the pre-meeting. I hadn't had a link sent to me because I'm new to the committee.
Welcome to the committee, Councillor Morgan. Thank you. Are there any other apologies that we know of, please? If you can let us know. No. Okay. Moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution, and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Okay, none. Thank you for that. Item 3 on our agenda is minutes of the Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 25th of May 2021. Let's check those for accuracy, if we may. So,
excuse me, Chair, were you going to do a roll call?
Oh, thank you for that. I missed that. Thank you. Can I ask Mark, please, if we can do a roll call of those attending?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Councillor Adams.
Present.
Councillor Cuss. Councillor Lindsay Harding.
Present.
Councillor Johnston.
Present.
Councillor Kirby.
Present.
Councillor Mann.
Present.
Councillor Morgan.
Present.
Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Sorrellis.
Present.
Councillor Sargent.
Present.
Councillor Simmons. Councillor Taylor.
Present.
And Councillor Whittle.
I'm here.
I think we missed Councillor Etheridge, did we?
It was just for the members of the committee, Chair.
Oh, thank you. My mistake. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so the minutes of the 25th of May 2021. Checking for accuracy, if we may. Pages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Can someone please move these minutes as accurate?
Chair.
Thank you. And seconded?
Second, Chair.
Thank you. We're going to vote on this using Microsoft Forms, so hopefully officers will shortly put the screen up for us to vote. If any members joined us by phone, please speak and let us know what your vote is. Thank you.
Chair, if I could just say that as Councillor Morgan there is, and obviously as I wasn't in these previous meetings, I won't be voting on them.
Right, thank you for that, Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, Chair, and I abstain because I wasn't at the last meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson.
Same with me, Chair.
Thank you too.
Yes, Chair. Perhaps any member who was absent could just click on abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. Just await the outcome of that vote.
Yes, that's been carried, Chair, with 6 for and 1 abstention.
Chair.
Yes.
Whilst the forms box came up, none of the details came up, so I wasn't able to vote. So I would vote for the minutes.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. That's 7 votes for now, Mark. Thank you.
That's correct, Chair.
Chair, I'm also not sure whether my vote was registered, but it just seemed to disappear. But I'm clearly for as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittle. Anyone else? Okay, thank you for that. Those minutes are agreed. On to item 4, which is to approve and sign the minutes of the Special Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee meeting held on 23rd of June 2021. Any points of accuracy on page 7, 8, 9, and 10?
I'll move those as well, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll vote on this now on Microsoft Forms 2. And please let us know if you have any problems with forms.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
I wonder on the Community Empowerment Fund, I did raise a question in the meeting about whether the if the fund wasn't spent this year, would it be carried over? And I seem to recall that we were informed it was, but I can't see it actually minuted.
Thank you for that, Councillor Riddle. Mark, can you enlighten us, please?
Yes, Chair. Outside of the meeting, we can speak to Councillor Whittle about that and try and get that rectified.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whittle.
Did anyone have problems voting with forms this time, please?
My poll has disappeared. Oh, I got it back now. Sorry. Oh, nothing's happening.
For some reason, Mark, I seem to have agenda item 10 forms poll on my screen.
And I do.
I do as well.
Okay, well,
I think we've all got it.
We're not going to vote on this now, so let's just...
Okay, well, if we close that
it's right.
form, Chair, the item 10, that's obviously come up too soon. Yes. So if we ignore that, and the poll for the second set of minutes that we were looking into this evening, agenda item 4, that has been carried with 7 for and 1 abstention. So we've had 8 responses and 7 for, 0 against and 1 abstention on that second set of minutes, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. We move on then to item 5, which is consideration of any matter referred to this committee in accordance with the call-in procedure. Are there any matters, please, Mark?
No, nothing's been brought forward, Chair.
Thank you for that. Straightforward then over to item 6 on our agenda, Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Programme. Over to Mark, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members are asked to consider the Forward Work Programme alongside the Cabinet Work Programme as appended to the report and to suggest any changes. Members will note that the next meeting of this committee is on the 9th of November. At that meeting, we'll have Team Caerphilly Transformation 6-month update report. We'll also have a procurement reform report, which has been moved from, which was originally scheduled for this evening, but has been moved. And then also there's the Corporate Services and Miscellaneous Finance 21-22 Budget Monitoring Report for period 5. That's also on the agenda for that evening in November. So that's something for diaries, members. And if members are happy, I would like to seek approval to publish the Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee Forward Work Programme as appended to the report onto the Council's website. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mark. Before we go to that, can I just invite Councillor Sargent to speak, please? You're on mute, Margaret.
Apologies. On the Cabinet Work Programme for the 10th of the 11th, it mentions commercial and investment strategy. Is that possible that can be brought to the P&R committee on the 9th?
Councillor Gordon, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. On the 9th of the 11th meeting, they got procurement reform. Elena is down for that. Well, that comes back under me, just to change the cabinet member's name.
So are you saying that the procurement reform item on our agenda, P&R agenda for November, will cover the issue that Margaret mentioned?
No, well, I'm not sure, but the point I make is that I will be presenting our report, not on the forward work program.
Yeah.
Come standards and just saying my name will have to be changed.
Thank you for the clarification, Councillor Gordon. Over to Ed, please, to respond to Margaret's query.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a bit of context for Councillor Sargent before we determine whether bringing that particular report into scrutiny is worth your time or not. Essentially, that particular strategy was given a 12-month time frame. So what we're taking to Cabinet is our intention to roll that strategy as it is forward for an additional 12 months. So effectively, you've already considered the contents of that strategy. It's really just the fact that it's coming to the end of its stated life that we want to bring through to Cabinet. So I'm not sure whether there would be too much benefit in members scrutinising it the night before. But of course, if you wish to have a look at it, we're more than happy to bring it to P&R the evening before Cabinet, as stated.
Thank you, Ed. Margaret, are you content with that response?
Can I ask at what stage you are then, Ed, if it's going to go for another 6 months?
Yeah, I think it's basically recognising the impact, Councillor Sargent, that COVID's had on that strategy and our ability to deliver the contents within it. So effectively, we want to carry on with the strategy as previously agreed, just give ourselves some extra time to catch up effectively. So there won't be any changes proposed, more so
Okay.
a little bit of extra time added on.
That's fine with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Margaret. That said then, is the committee prepared to agree the final forward work programme for Mark to publish on our website? Are you content with that?
Yeah.
We need to get someone to move and second it, Chair, and then
I'll move that one.
Yep.
Second. Yeah.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. And here's the poll on forms on our screen now.
yeah, that's carried, Chair. 12 for and no abstentions and no against.
Thank you for that, Mark. On to item 7 of our agenda, to receive and consider the following cabinet reports, of which there are 14. Have any of these been brought forward, please, Mark?
No, Chair. None of the reports have been brought forward today.
Right, thank you very much for that. Moving on to item 8 on our agenda, to receive a notice of motion, review of council constitution and member protocol. Councillor Etheridge has 5 minutes to introduce his motion.
Okay, good evening, Councillor Kirby and everybody. Please forgive me if I start coughing because I'm doing very well, but the notice of motion looks at establishing a working party, a cross-party group to look at communication, engagement, the constitution and the protocols. It would look at major delegated decisions, not minor delegated decisions, major delegated decisions. It would also look at the process of cabinet call-ins and a possibility of an appeals process. The protocols, and I know some of you are familiar with this, where, you know, we have got in a bit of a muddle, I think, in regarding people, and myself included, from other wards actually contacting me, and I went to Mr. Tranter and he said, you've got to get a written letter. I had one this morning, which I passed on to the Portland Fife councillors. So I believe we need to tighten up the protocols in regard that. Also, the questions to the leader and the timescale on queries, Chair. It's normally 20 working days when an elected member can get a response from officers. Now, I do, excuse me, I do appreciate that the council is stretched at the moment with COVID, and you know, sometimes officers and responses do take a considerable time. I'm also concerned about the statements at council where we have sort of no questions. So I'd like all these things looked at as well. Now, if I give a couple of examples, in regard scrutiny committees, the effective scrutiny is a key function of the council. The operation of council's constitution is a matter for the council, and this matter must be discussed and any concerns raised with a monitoring officer if we are not happy about it. I did write to the Welsh Government, and I did have a letter saying that the council's constitution falls entirely to the monitoring officer. If you remember, a number of years ago, Chair, there was £70,000 spent on consultants in regard to PFI project for the Welsh school. And, you know, no problems with that. It was obviously done correctly, but none of that actually came to councillors and haven't come to councillors since. We had an information report, and I would like to see matters like that not being decided by delegated powers come to an actual scrutiny committee. And finally, Chair, I'd like the scrutiny committees to be looked at from the constitution point of view to operate more like a select committee where we call in actual witnesses. For example, I give two examples here. I've had numerous queries regarding the Grange Hospital and the waiting times, and also one-to-one, why can't we have GPs seeing patients on a face-to-face basis? Now, if that came to scrutiny, we could actually call witnesses and operate more like a select committee. But finally, I would like the scrutiny committee, please, to consider an all-party working group to look at all these issues and move forward. Thank you, Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Councillor Etheridge. The notice of motion is open for debate. Anyone wish to speak on this motion, please? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Kevin, for giving us that extended notice of motion with the explanations. One of the questions I had at the pre-meeting was this item of a major issue, and where would we be looking to say what is a major issue and which is one that we can let go because we would all accept it without any problem. You partly answered that in your presentation, but I think there's still an awful lot of issues there we could be talking about. Who is really interested or concerned or affected by some of these issues that we might be arguing about if it's major or not. Now, the one thing you mentioned was about calling witnesses, of course, like a select committee, and you mentioned about doctors facing their patients. And that was a question that was actually asked today in the First Minister's questions in Wales, and it came from a North Wales member. And all kinds of questions like that. This really would need an awful lot of investigation about where do we put the door to open or close for between a major or minor investigation or decision. So that's opening up quite a lot of discussion at such a task and finish group. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Mann, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think you probably need a seconder, so I'll do that.
We haven't got a movie yet.
Oh, I thought Councillor Etheridge was allowed to move.
Councillor Etheridge is presenting, but I'll ask the committee for a mover and a seconder. I'm happy to take you in either role, Colin.
Well, I was assuming that Councillor Etheridge had been accepted as moving. I will do so otherwise. Saying partly in answer to some of the points raised by Councillor Adams, I think this is a working group, and one thing I think that most of us would agree on is that working groups certainly previously have worked to the satisfaction of most members. The most recent was the car parking working group, but there have been several others, and it's a system that does seem to suit people and come up with results. And I would have thought that the working group and the relevant officers between them could maybe deliberate or could decide actually on the sort of points that Mike Adams actually raised. There are probably things which are obviously major and vice versa, but and there'll be a few in the middle. But I would leave it to the wisdom of the working group to decide those sort of issues.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Morgan.
Can I come back in to answer very quickly on that?
No, Mike, I'll take it.
Okay, okay.
Councillor Morgan next, please.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair. Reading the notice of motion that Kevin's presented, it seems to me that you're looking for further scrutiny of, as you say, the things that are under delegated powers and what. Well, we consulted on reports which are directly related to your area. We have member seminars where you can put your views forward. We have scrutinies, put forward your concerns. You have full council where you can show your concerns on anything and hopefully get people to vote in your favour. We've got cabinet can be addressed, even notices of motion. There's so many ways in which we look at and scrutinise the council. But I think if we was to accept your proposal tonight and opening the door for yet another layer of bureaucracy, the local government gets accused of the slow wheels turning of local government. Well, I think you're adding yet another layer of bureaucracy. More engagement, more consultation, on top of all the statutory requirements which already exist and which we already comply with. I think it's just going to make decision making slow down even further. I'm going to vote against this notice of motion tonight. It offers no further democracy for any of our residents. It would slow down the decision-making process, and it would simply be a further layer of bureaucracy. And I don't support it. I think if you want to make changes to the Constitution, then you should bring forward those changes yourself and see if they get supported. It's as simple as that. That's how democracy works. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Over to Councillor Sorrellis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I feel very much the same as Councillor Morgan on this. This Constitution, as far as I see, has been in place since 2002. It works in everybody's interest. And I just can't understand why, at this particular time, there is a need to change it. Councillor Etheridge hasn't suggested to me anything that in any way would improve the way in which we operate. It's operated for both Plaid Cymru during their term of office, as well as ours. And I just can't see why at this particular time it would be necessary to make any changes. I'm just happy with the way that we are able at the moment to challenge anything, to work towards solving things as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And this would just bring in further delays. So I would certainly move against this along with Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Councillor Sorrellis.
So,
over to
point of correction, Chair.
Go on.
Point of correction, if I may. The Constitution may have been started in 2002. It probably was, but there have been lots of amendments to the Constitution between then and now.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Sorry, Chair, I was still on mute. Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Councillor Colin Mann pointed out, from time to time the Constitution does get amended. It's an evolving document, not one that was drawn up at one particular time, and therefore no changes can be made. And I think it's a better way of doing it to do it through a cross-party working group to suggest amendments to the Constitution, because from time to time it does need to be looked at and does need to be improved in the light of circumstances as they've evolved. So I support this notice of motion because I think the best way to do it is through such a working party. It's not going to be add any extra layers to anything, because that working party would be making suggestions to the council to amend the Constitution if it's so desired at that time. So it wouldn't be adding any extra layers of bureaucracy, and from time to time it is necessary to review a Constitution and to look to see if there are ways of making it work better. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Who's next? Councillor Miles, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure that I can support this motion because I think I would like to have advice from the monitoring officer on whether a working party is actually the way to amend the Constitution. I'm reading Article 14 at the moment, I've got it up on my screen, which covers the review and revision of the Constitution. And that places the key role in proposing or recommending amendments. It puts it in the hands of the monitoring officer. And he says, a key role for the monitoring officer is to be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the Constitution adopted by the Council and to make recommendations for ways in which it could be amended. It goes on to say that in undertaking this task, the monitoring officer may record and analyse issues raised with him or her by members, officers, the public and other stakeholders. So I'm interpreting that to mean that if any members have issues with the Constitution, then they need to raise those with the monitoring officer, who will take a view on whether the Constitution should or shouldn't be amended to take those into consideration. So I'm not sure about the role of the working group within that. So anyway, before I could support it, I think I'd like to hear the monitoring officer's views on it and whether a working group is the way to review the Constitution or not. I just don't know. So at the moment, I think I'd be abstaining on it because I don't feel like I can make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mark, can you advise us, please? Is Mr. Tranter with us today?
Yes, he is, Chair.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi,
Chair.
Rob.
Hi there. Yeah, good evening, members. I think this notice of motion, with the greatest respect, is rather premature. The monitoring officers of Wales are currently in the process of putting together a new draft constitution for the 22 councils in Wales to be adopted. Now, I've got no timescale yet on when that will be available, but certainly when the draft is available, I will bring that to members' attention. And whilst Councillor Miles is quite correct that it's one of my jobs to keep the Constitution under review, at the end of the day, the Constitution is a matter for Council, and it's Council decides on the Constitution. A number of issues raised by Councillor Etheridge, again, with the greatest respect, we can already deal with these issues. So, for example, he brings up the old chestnut of constituents from other wards contacting councillors from different wards. My view on that is pretty straightforward, frankly. Ward councillors ought to be representing their constituents, and if members get requests like that, then they should be directing those requests to the ward councillor or councillors. It's pretty straightforward. There is a process within the Constitution where members, where constituents can contact a councillor from another ward, but that's quite restrictive. That's about obtaining information. And what I would say there also is there's nothing wrong in the constituent contacting, for example, the officer directly in that situation. Councillor Etheridge raises the issue about the PFI report. My understanding is that the PFI report will be coming along to a scrutiny committee. Again, I've got no timescale on that. It's not particularly my area, but a report is coming. And the final point I'd like to make is that all the council's reports, all its decisions, all its minutes are publicly available. Everything that we do is within the public gaze, and that must be right, mustn't it? Because at the end of the day, we are a democratic organisation. So those are the points that I'd like to make on the Constitution and on this notice of motion. But a final point as well. Members will be aware that there are a series of corporate reviews being undertaken, one of which is on decision making. And again, some of the points that are raised within this notice of motion are perhaps covered in that corporate review as well. So, look, it's a matter for members. Indeed, it will be a matter for the meeting of council to consider this notice of motion. But if there are any questions from members that I can help with, or any queries, I'm more than happy to do so, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that. Councillor Morgan, you still got your hand up. Did you want to speak?
Actually, yeah, I would like to Jez, but I was just about to put my hand back up. I didn't realise I'd left it up. But if I could just say, regarding John Taylor saying there that we have made amendments over the years, and it is an evolving document. And I would guard against setting up a working group to make a whole swathe of adjustments, as mentioned by Councillor Etheridge, because when you make a whole swathe of adjustments, a whole swathe of changes to the Constitution, that's when you make mistakes. When we use it as an evolving document with slow and incremental changes, that's when you get a better Constitution. So again, I will say this is why I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to continue where I was before I was putting my plate in the queue, it was just the very last part of the notice of motion. Of course, this is about setting up the working party, report, recommendations, implementation, taking the prior to next May's elections and being implemented then. I don't think the way that we have had our working parties coming together and the extent that is being implied should be looked at here, we'd never get it done in that time anyway. Should it be interfering with what the new council will be looking at next May? I just wanted to make that point. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to comment on Mr. Tranter's what he had to say about us being a little premature. I would have thought this was the exact time, if a new constitution is being developed, if a working group of cross-party members are going to improve the constitution, I would have thought that would add value to the constitution, not make it worse.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Councillor Johnston, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's I got two reasons why I can't and won't be supporting this motion tonight. Firstly, I know Councillor Eldridge, when there's been issues in my ward and they've went to Kevin, to be fair, has always emailed me and they've been dealt with. On a second point is, what is it, 9 years now I've been there, and quite often we have seen changes to the constitution, when it's been needed. The constitution's changed. I don't see why you change a constitution just for the sake of it. If there's issues need changing, why haven't they been brought forward? So that says to me is there's none need changing yet, but if there is, then bring each one as it comes up individually, bring them forward. And if it needs changing, then we have seen it over the past 9 years. For me, we have made them changes. So I don't see why we need to take people out, busy lives, enough meetings as it is, without setting up another meeting, just to bring forward to other meetings. We might as well have a meeting about the meeting before the scrutiny meeting, because that's how it seems to be going at the minute. All they want is meetings to discuss things and make no difference to the people of the borough. Thank you, Chair. I will be voting against it.
Thank you, Gary. I've got no one else showing to speak. Does anyone else wish to speak on this notice of motion? Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. I won't keep you long. It's there was one thing that concerned me with what Mr. Tranter said, that there didn't seem to be any timescale on the various things he was talking about. I mean, we could be months, years into the future, so I don't know what prospect there is of things changing via that particular route. That's what concerns me, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else now wish to speak before we move on? I've got no hands showing. Okay, members, we're asked to consider the notice of motion and make an appropriate recommendation to council. So we have a mover for the motion from Councillor Mann. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, it's moved and seconded. I think we now move to the vote on Councillor Etheridge's notice of motion. And here's the forms in front of us now. If anyone has a problem with forms, please do say. Just awaiting the vote.
Yes, Chair. So that motion has fallen. There's 4 votes for, 8 votes against, and no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mark. So our recommendation to council is not to support the notice of motion. Thank you. On to item 9 on our agenda, and that's Workforce Development Strategy 2021-2024. And I understand Cabinet Member Councillor Colin Gordon will introduce this report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And before I start, I'd like to congratulate you on becoming Chair of Policy and Resources. I must say it's long overdue. Workforce Development Strategy 2021 through to 19 and to 2024. The purpose of the report is to consult with Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee in relation to the Workforce Development Strategy. The Council team Caerphilly bedded together a transformation strategy was adopted by Cabinet on the 12th of June 2019. As part of this strategy, 10 corporate reviews have been undertaken to transform how the Council works, and workforce development is one of them. One of the actions of this review is to produce a workforce development strategy which is attached for scrutiny members at Appendix A. The changing landscape in public health, politics, economics, technology, demography, environmental impact mitigation and social attitudes are influencing how we resource the Council. With concerns over skill shortages, an ageing workforce and increasing competition to attract talent to Caerphilly, a strategically planned approach to workforce development is necessary to align strategy, process and people. Workforce development is being undertaken to different degrees across the Council. This ambitious strategy will coordinate an approach to workforce development across the Council services. The Council's clear commitment to workforce development is now captured in the Workforce Development Strategy 21 through to 24 to ensure that we have a well-trained, well-motivated and flexible workforce that are capable of dealing with the many future challenges we face across the Council. P&R Scrutiny Committee are asked to note the contents of the report and make comments prior to recommending the Workforce Development Strategy 2021 through to 24 attached Appendix 1 to Cabinet for approval. The recommendations are made to ensure that we have a workforce development strategy in place to support a workforce in future that is fit for purpose and equipped with the necessary skills to innovate and move the Council forward the Caerphilly way. GMB, Unison and Unite have been consulted on the strategy. The strategy will be considered a Cabinet review tomorrow. The Scrutiny Committee and its recommendations will be reported verbally. With that, Chair, I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Before I invite members to raise any questions or issues, can I just check if Lynn Donovan wants to add anything before we move on?
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to echo what Councillor Gordon has said. It is an ambitious strategy, and the effective implementation of this strategy will ensure that our current and future workforce needs are not only known, but they're modelled, and that we are capable of meeting changing service delivery requirements and needs for the future. Members will also note that the strategy is all-encompassing across the whole of the authority. It's not just a document with a responsibility for officers within People Services, and you will see that many of the actions within the action plan have other heads of service who have responsibility, and I'm pleased to say that the other heads of service across the authority have welcomed this report and have been very engaging with it, and I'm grateful for their support, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. Over to Councillor Whittle, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the strategy is a very good one, but critical to the strategy, of course, is the vital question of when will staff be returning to work? Now, I'm mindful of the fact that I've heard somewhere in a meeting that 85% of the staff are quite content to stay home and do their work, but I don't think that's conducive to developing people's careers. Young people in particular who will join the organisation need, in my opinion, to sit alongside older and more experienced members of staff to get that interaction, to feel part of a team, because teamwork is what we're constantly saying this is all about. And of course, they will also need to begin to start not only talking to members of the public on the telephone, but actually face-to-face as well. And I think the public will welcome face-to-face contact with our staff. Lots of our staff are working anyway. It's only the major offices now which seem to be fairly deserted with respect. And I think it's very important that staff, if they're to continue with their careers and developing their careers, and this should apply to all councils across Wales, is that we start to get back to the days of conferences, college courses, training courses, all very important, so that we can learn from other councils and they can learn from us as well. But the first question I want to ask is, when are we really now going to start to consider opening the T-Penallers of this world? Because we can't carry on forever. COVID is with us. 91% of people in Wales have had virtually 2 injections, and some of them are now having their 3rd. So we are, and it seems like the other 9 or 10% either perhaps will never need it, or there's a percentage of people who don't want it, and we have to respect their opinions. It's not my opinion, but I guess I have to learn to live with it, and I would like to persuade them not to, but I can't do that. So, but we really do need to start opening our offices up, and then that's when, in my opinion, the staff training will progress to provide better services for the public who are paying for it through their taxes and their council taxes.
Thank you, Lindsay. You will be aware, of course, Welsh Government's COVID guidance remains work from home if you can, and we have to think of our workforce's health and well-being. We don't really want to expose them unnecessarily to infection. I know Lynn will want to come back on that. Before I invite her to do that, I'm going to ask Councillor Saralis to have his say, please.
Yeah, it's just a question I have on the report related to pages 40 and 41. Looking at the tables there relating to gender, I'm just wondering whether there are any specific measures in place to promote women into managerial roles. It does appear that looking at the percentage of our employees, there's far more women than men in our employ, but very few women are actually achieving the higher levels of pay compared with the men, and are obviously in lesser roles. So I'm just wondering whether there are any specific measures that are in place.
Thank you, Roy. And I understand that Councillor Mann wants to come in. I can add to your shopping list, please, and I've got a query as well. On page 42 of our package, page 9 of the strategy, there are details of employees with a disability discussed, and we say in the strategy that our councils recognise as going the extra mile to make sure disabled people get a fair chance in the workplace, and that's really welcome. And then when we look at the data of how many people with a disability declared a disability, we have 1.7% who make that declaration. And I don't think the rhetoric in the strategy matches the data. I hope you'll be able to tell us what we're going to do to encourage our workforce to be more representative of the community. But having asked that, I'm going to invite Councillor Mann to speak, and then hopefully bring back Lynn for the conversation. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Chair. And thinking about ward councillors, that discussion earlier, and looking at the screen, it looks like a Pont Fry takeover bit at the moment, Chair. But
you are very lucky people.
That's another debatable point. Sorry, I wouldn't have raised really because I didn't realise, because I missed the area gender. I didn't realise that Roy Saralis was going to mention the gender issue on pay. But looking at those that table on page, what is it, page 41, isn't it, or page 8, whichever you're looking at, it is stark, isn't it? The how long the blue line is compared with the orange line higher up. And of course, and it's not until you get to the higher salaries that, of course, the men then feature in usually in greater numbers. And I think it's a very valid question of what we hear about the glass ceiling quite often, and maybe we've got quite a thick glass ceiling here. I don't know it. I don't know how it I don't know how it corresponds with other authorities, but it is stark when you look at those particular tables on that page, isn't it?
Yep. Thank you, Colin. I agree. Lynn, your chance now to come back and assuage all our anxieties, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully I can capture all your questions, but I'm sure members will advise me if I'm not. If I start with Councillor Whittle's query, as you stated, Chair, Welsh Government advice is clearly to work from home where possible now and wherever you can. It is difficult because the public are seeing so many other services opening up. It is difficult for them to understand perhaps why our buildings aren't opening up for them, but we are following Welsh Government advice. We do have staff working in our buildings. All of our staff should be working. The service should be no different to the members of the public, albeit I do understand they can't attend our offices, but I think the public have adapted very, very well. But as I said, all of our staff are working. In terms of the career development, Councillor Whittle is quite right in raising that as an issue. But what I can say, conferences are still taking place. Training is still taking place. We are providing training as well. I manage the health and safety team. They are providing training. Some of it is physical in-person training as well. So that is taking place. So any training needs that are identified for our employees through their one-to-one meetings with their managers, we will always look to support that where we need to. Staff have enrolled on formal qualifications as well. So that is all in place. New starters, we have processes in place for induction for them. Some of that does include attending the workplace so they can be mentored safely with risk assessments in place by their colleagues as well. It is certainly something we're very conscious of and something since March last year that we've all had to adapt to very, very quickly, because ensuring we support the development of our staff is key to the future of our service delivery. It is different, but we are all adapting. We're learning through many of the national groups that we all sit on. We're learning from our colleagues as well. And whatever we can share that information, we are. But as I said, all of our staff are still working and those learning opportunities are still there, albeit provided differently to them. Am I okay to move on to the next question,
yes, please do.
Chair? Is that okay? In terms of the gender, that really is reflective of the national picture. Members will be aware we report every year on our gender pay gap, and the information that that provides is that we do have more female staff in part-time posts. And as we always report, that is a really good reflection on the council that we offer flexibility for our staff to undertake these part-time posts, quite often more than one, so that they can fit their employment around their home lives and their family lives. We do actually have quite a lot of female staff in senior officer posts, and I'm sure Councillor Gordon will support me on this in terms of the meetings that he attends and the number of senior staff that have female posts. Members will be aware in terms of recruitment, we have to have fair recruitment processes. If we do have a situation where there is a genuine occupational need for a male or a female, we can advertise specifically for that. But in terms of the senior officer posts we currently have, we don't have that at the moment. We have to advertise and then we look to appoint the best candidate. A lot of the time it's members that are making those appointments, but I do appreciate it's based on the applications that we receive. We will continue to advertise where we feel appropriate. We will support employment into the organisation, but I think it's important that we continue to support flexibility of employment as well to suit male and female candidates and current employees to work around their home lives. In terms of the disability then, our employees don't have to notify us and to record whether they have a disability or not. So that is probably why that statistic looks a little out of kilter to what society is telling us. It's not a characteristic that we have to report. We regularly ask our staff for information. We're always encouraging our staff to give us that information. As an employer, we want to know so that we can support our staff to be in work and to be in well, to look at reasonable adjustments. A lot of the time we're working with staff as individuals to look at reasonable adjustments, but the figures are because staff don't have to declare a disability to us. I hope that helps, Chair.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you, Lynn, for the explanations. We have more people who wish to enter the discussion now, so we may have to call on you again, I'm afraid. Councillor Johnston first, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a few points on staff not returning as yet. I know the First Minister has called on where people to work from home if they can, that they should be during the COVID going up. Plus, we also, some of us will know that he's cancelled our party conference in November up in Llandudno. So in Wales, he is taking it serious and trying to keep the numbers down as much as possible. But I'm also concerned about those workers hoping to get back to work, especially for their well-being. You know, mental health is a big issue. And are we still touching base with all the employees and seeing, you know, that the mental health is okay, and, you know, and as soon as it is possible and is allowed, that we get them back into the office as soon as possible? Because it's not only the mental health, it's also the places around our buildings that rely on the trade from there as well, you know, to help local Bargoed, for example, is right in the middle of the town, you know. So these getting the workers back in the office and spending money locally will also help as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gary. Before I call in, I'll just ask the next two speakers to have their say first, if I may. Councillor Mann, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was reading the focusing on what matters. I should be able to quote the page and I can't find it at the moment. It's large page 47. But I think one of the, apologies if this is covered, but what occurred to me was resilience. We have an example at the moment where there is no designated deputy chief executive, and going further down, down is probably the wrong word, but going to frontline services again, I have found at times that someone is off or someone has left, and there hasn't been anyone to fill that role, and some of these are frontline services. I mean, for example, I think it's quite well. We all know there's a shortage of lorry drivers, but the council doesn't normally have a problem with retaining staff because of the security of the job and so on. But we do seem to have more gaps than we're certainly used to in all parts of the organisation. Now, I don't know whether I don't know whether I can have a response to that, but it is quite worrying to hear some of the examples that are given.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Adams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Part of the Parliament triumvirate again. And have you noticed, members, how we look as a threesome?
That's what I was worried about, Mike.
I thought you might be. But there we go. It goes back to the point that the Chair made in his question to Lynn on disability issues. And I'm sure, like me, you've watched many of the programmes that have been there in front of us on the television with how the disabled have tried to make the best of the last 18 months and one thing or another. And you would have seen that in many instances, their own home environment is not always very conducive to being able to work. And one of the things I'm sure that Lynn will be able to agree with me is if our disabled people who identify themselves and we know what their needs are, in a working environment where they can be helped to control that environment to the best of their ability, like in the office, is certainly something that we would hopefully always be looking to do, to make sure that if they want to come back to work, it's because they feel better at work, and where we can help them to carry on how well they can do their job. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on a few comments that's been made. Lindsay mentioned about 80-odd% people would like to come back into continue working from home. We've done 2 surveys, and Lynn will correct me if I'm wrong. We've done 2 surveys. It is correct that the novelty is worn off with a lot of people, but on the surveys, it was sort of telling us that people, especially office-based staff, would prefer a 50-50 approach, perhaps 3 days in work and 2 days at home, or 2 days in work and 3 days at home. I do agree on the mental health issue. I mean, I think people need interaction with other people, and we are looking at this. A few weeks ago, I did present a report to Cabinet on alert level 0 from the Welsh Government, and I'm doing an update tomorrow. But just one of the things in the Welsh Government, it clearly says, as Lynn said rightly, Welsh Government are encouraging people to continue to work from home wherever possible. We are looking to reopen our customer service desk at T Penalta, but I think probably our outbuildings we'll be looking in the new year. Like I said, that's all we are doing is following Welsh Government guidelines. But like I said, on staff participation in work, yes, I mean, I think I can't see us ever getting back to the 5 days a week. Saying that, who knows what will happen in 10 years' time, and hopefully this will all be forgotten. We don't know. But like I said, at the moment, the surveys are telling us that they like a bit of both, a 50-50.
Thank you. Councillor Sargent, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's nice to hear what Colin has just said. 50-50 sounds very good to me. I was actually going to speak on what Councillor Johnson said about staff's well-being. I think it's vitally important that they don't feel cut off. I think it's vitally important that they don't start their day too soon and are still working at 11 o'clock in the night because they've fitted in absolutely everything else that needs to be done. So well-being is top of my priority, and it's nice to hear that 50-50 could work, and it would be nice to see if that could be in the new year. Thank you.
Margaret. Thank you. Councillor Mann, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick word on the disability thing. I'm sure there is a bigger headcount of disability if everyone who was entitled to actually declared a disability. I've spoken to people who could claim that. In fact, some people in my own family, and they prefer. Unfortunately, it's seen as a label quite often, isn't it? And there are people who would prefer not to declare that. So I'm wondering how accurate that figure is, really.
Yes, as Lynn said, it's underreported. It's the same in most employers, I think. Certainly in my organisation, Civil Service Department, we have about 70% who actually do complete diversity data for us, but that means, of course, 30% don't. So I'm sure it's similar in other public sector organisations. Councillor Morgan, please.
It's something to do with the workforce development strategy. It was something that Councillor Sargent was speaking about, but the truth is, it's probably something more to do with the next one, which is the wellbeing strategy. But I would say, is there anything, I didn't read anything in there about limiting screen time for people when they are working at home. I've heard too many officers say, far too often about the amount of hours that they're getting up and switching on, and they're often still working late into the evening. Now, while that is acceptable and a part of the massive transition that we undertook, where we basically went from normal way of working to everybody working from home, and therefore everybody was putting in that extra effort. to deal with the pandemic. That is not something which is good for people long term. So I think that probably crosses both.
I think you're right, it does. Thank you, Sean. Over to Lynn then, please. Your chance to respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. And again, hopefully I've captured this, and I think some of the answers will cross over each other. So I hope that'll be acceptable for members. In terms of the mental health concerns that have been raised by members for our staff, that is something that we are very, very aware of. Even though people are now working from home, the message that we, I think, successfully have got through to staff now is work is not a place where we go to. Work is something that we do, and we can do it from anywhere. And I think the organisation has adapted really well to that. There are regular one-to-ones that are taking place between staff and their managers, and any concerns that are identified in those or in ad hoc meetings that can happen with staff and managers. We are able, and we have got staff working in buildings because they believe their mental health is being affected by being at home, and we have safely got them working at buildings with a risk assessment that is specifically designed for them and signed by them and their line manager. So whilst we have risk assessments for our buildings or for functions in our buildings, we will also have risk assessments for individual members of staff, and they will vary for each of those members of staff. It could be some of them are in every day, it could be some of them are in just a given number of days a week or a month, and they are tailored to staff. So as I said, we are very, very aware of the impact emotionally this pandemic has had on staff, and a change it has brought about to everybody overnight. Councillor Gordon has mentioned the staff survey. We are looking to do a joint a seminar for all members on the results of the staff survey, because that touches so much, not just of the two strategies that I've brought to you this evening, of some of the other work that we're doing, including agile working. What is clearly coming through on the staff survey is not just the staff are happy to be working from home in the main. A large proportion of our staff, Councillor Gordon is right, some would like a mix, but staff do feel generally there is support to their well-being. So those staff who do have health issues, where perhaps before they struggle to get to work, what they are now telling us is working from home is helping them with the support of their manager. If they're not feeling very well, they're able to perhaps start work later, finish a little later, or work additional hours at different times during that week, that month, or later on, and they feel it's benefiting their well-being to be able to continue to work in, but at their pace and in their time, providing its support service needs. So that is all going on in the background, although I appreciate sometimes it's easy to look at buildings and not see that, but there is lots of individual work going on with our staff. And as I said, the survey results, of which we had quite a high proportion of a response, it was a third of the workforce that was surveyed actually responded, are giving us very positive responses about agile working and flexibility. And in terms of the members' seminar that I've just referred to, agile working is also going to be on the agenda to give you all an update of where we are with that work stream. Councillor Mann's question about resilience is also very important. You will have noticed within the workforce development strategy, we've talked about a workforce planning toolkit. That will be important for our managers and our heads of service to look at in terms of what this service looks like now, what it's going to look like in the future, and that could be the immediate future, short, medium term or long term, and resilience will need to be built into that. Over recent months, we've seen issues in recruitment in a number of areas, and that is being reflected nationally. It's not just a Caerphilly matter. There are discussions ongoing with national groups, would be the groups that I attend with the heads of HR and WLGA. The Chief Exec is having these discussions, relevant directors are, and relevant heads of service. It's an issue that we're all facing, and we're all trying to look at how we can address those issues. We're doing what we can in the council as well with the policies and procedures that we have. So that is in place as well to address the immediate issues. And staff within HR have already started work with heads of service to look at their resilience, to look at workforce planning, Part of that we're looking at as well is how we grow our own, how we bring in more apprentices, trainees, how we look at school placements for people to have a more of an understanding of the council. So we're trying to look at something slightly different and pay more attention perhaps to them than we have previously, looking at vacancies we have. Can we use them differently if we can't recruit? But how do we give the young people or other people in our county borough the opportunity to gain employment with Caerphilly, and how we can help them to do that? So that's part of the work that we're looking at as well. Members will see you've on the agenda tonight as well is the wellbeing strategy. Part of that as well, you will have noticed, is not just about our staff wellbeing generally, but we're also very aware of the impact of COVID as well, which picks up on a number of the mental health issues that members have spoken about in the questions here. Councillor Morgan raised the issue about, can we limit time staff spend on screens at home? We can certainly try. Those are conversations that managers are having with their employees. At the end of the day, though, it is down to all of us as individuals to regulate ourselves and to make sure we're being disciplined with that, albeit I do accept it's sometimes easier said than done when you're on call after call, and knowing how conscientious our staff are. But our responsibility for our well-being is our own responsibility as employees and individuals, as well as that of the council, and it's together we can work to make sure that our employees are well and at work. I think I've covered members' questions, Chair, and I'm sure members will tell me if I haven't.
That was quite comprehensive. Thank you, Lynn. We have two more members who'd like to speak. Councillor Whittle, please.
Thank you, Chair. How do we know how many meetings our directors are having with their managers, and how many meetings the managers are having with all of the members of staff? And is there a system of monitoring people's computer usage? Because I feel that's important. I know I read somewhere that Admiral, for example, are insisting that if somebody's computer is hardly switched on during it's off for 3 or 4 days of the week whilst they're at home, they're actually calling their staff back in because clearly they can't be doing any work. But of course, you can't measure every member of staff's workload by the very fact that their computer is switched on, because some people can just switch computer on and you know, not even be working at that computer. But how can we, because there will be abuse of this system, you have to admit that as well. And how can we monitor that? I'm interested in the abuse of the system, obviously, but I'm more interested in the fact that a workforce, in my opinion, needs to be together. Now, when I was previously employed, they wanted the staff to consider working longer hours but shorter weeks. And naturally, everybody wanted the Friday off because then they could go away for a long weekend, which is perfectly logical and understandable. I was one of those first to put my hand up for that extra Friday off every 2 weeks. We worked a 9-day fortnight, and I got no issue with people working 9-day fortnights or 4-day weeks. I get a bit concerned when I hear 50-50, because I do feel that if you're in an office, you belong in an office. That's where you work, not at home, you know, because I don't feel part of a team then. And for me, working was not only getting money, so I could live my life, but it's also providing the service, but it's also being part of the team. I want to be part of the team. I don't want to be stuck in the house, because there are many people who have no one in the house with them and they're alone. And I fear that that is going to lead to mental health issues in the long term. And that is a big worry for me, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Lindsay. Before I call Lynn back in, there's a couple of other members, and I think on the point about spying on staff, I'm sure Lynn would want to work with our trade union colleagues on that. I'm sure that my trade union colleagues would really welcome that idea, Lindsay. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think my question is going to be rather more mundane. I think one in particular is showing my ignorance a little bit, but on page 47 of the strategy, it talks about developing a workforce data dashboard. Now, I'm not really sure what that is, I'm sure Lynn will be able to enlighten me about the dashboard. And the other one question, the My Time and My Time Extra programs, are they programs that we have developed, or are they ones that we are buying in? So mundane than some of the other questions.
Thank you, John. Councillor Miles, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to come back on the comments about screen time and the amount of time staff spend at their computers. Because I hear what Lynn was saying about, it's people need to regulate their own use of computers. But I just want to say that it's not only that, it's also about the design of people's working days. That I think where we are now is that people are doing all their work on computers. They're probably writing reports, they're looking at their emails, they're attending meetings. Everything they do is probably online. And I think there's an element of job design there that the council needs to be aware of, is that if you're putting somebody in a position where all they can do is work online all day, then we as a council, I think, have to be aware of that and be conscious of the environment that we're creating for staff. So it's not all about them self-regulating. It's just the point I wanted to make, really.
Thank you, Brenda. Lynn, please, would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. In terms of Councillor Whittle's comments, it is quite difficult to regulate staff. And just because somebody's laptop isn't on, Councillor Whittle is quite right, you can't measure that, because you could be on the phone, one call after another, which wouldn't require your laptop to be on. We have to trust our staff. We do trust our staff. If somebody wants to abuse their opportunities to work, they can do that in the office. They don't have to be at home. We found most staff have adapted really well. Managers are in contact with their staff, and also managers know their business. So managers would understand if work isn't being done, and that's when they need to have those conversations with their staff. So I appreciate Councillor Whittle's concerns that this could be open to abuse, but this is where the working relationship between managers and staff, has to be there. It has to be a good relationship, and it has to be constant communication to ensure staff are supported, that the work is being done at the service. But again, we have to trust our staff wherever they may be working. We do have that element of trust. And at the end of the day, services have to be provided, and managers would understand if they're not, and should understand where the shortfall would be and what the issues are there.
Could I say, Chair, that's very, sorry to interrupt, but it's very important. That's very encouraging, because with respect, Chair, you use the word spying on staff, not I. Any trade unionist and or manager would recognise, and trade unionists in particular should recognise, that if there are people abusing the system, then the extra workload is going on their colleagues, and that's the unfairness of it that I'm trying to highlight. I didn't say
I'm not
spying.
with you, Lindsay, but Lynn has explained managers are responsible for making sure that their colleagues.
And all my question is, are they doing it? I'm here to scrutinise managers and directors as well.
What we've got as well is, in terms of service delivery, some services have been able to allow their staff to work outside of office hours instead of office hours, which has supported them with childcare during the pandemic. So we may not find some staff working 8:30 to 5 every day as they used to, but they may be working weekends, evenings to suit their home lives and service delivery. And that's the balance that a lot of our staff have found, which has worked really well. And whilst we were forced into working from home, we found lots of new ways of working that have been able to support staff and their home lives, which has been excellent, to be fair. Councillor Taylor's question about the data dashboard. What we're looking to do, Councillor Taylor, is have a suite of information for managers to be able to assist them with their workforce planning. So in terms of numbers of staff they have, age profile, types of contracts, all those the type of information you would expect to have from staff at a glance to assist them going forward. So it sounds probably a little more interesting than maybe it is. But whereas now that information isn't easily available for managers, and perhaps sometimes the format they have isn't helpful to them, we look into make that simpler for them going forward. And any other information they feel is important, we can add that to it as well. The My Time and My Time Extra, that's supervision and PDRs. So the supervision happens regularly. As you know, some of our services are regulated and are prescribed in terms of the times they have that. And the PDRs happen once a year. What we've done is we've relaunched them and changed the name and branded it My Time and My Time Caerphilly in accordance with Team Caerphilly to give it a bit more of a feel for Caerphilly culture and how we want to work going forward. I think that was it, Chair. I hope it was.
I think so. Thank you very much, Lynn. Councillor Gordon wants to come in, please.
Yeah, I don't want to prolong this now, Chair, but because the next report we'll be having a similar discussion, I think. But I think what we got to remember, a lot of our employees have made no difference at all the pandemic. I mean, not all our employees work in offices. So, like I said, and a lot of them have gone up and above their normal duties. I mean, I don't disagree with Lindsay. Perhaps there is the odd one or two, and myself and Lynn have had this discussion, you know, who may take an advantage. That's just people being people. But I think the vast majority of our workforce have gone up and above. As far as agile and flexible working and getting back in the office, I was having discussions with Lynn and other officers about agile and flexible working before the pandemic hit, for various reasons, inclement weather, snow, whatever, where people would be able to carry on their normal day's work if they had the right equipment. A few years ago, I attended a meeting up in Reading in Microsoft. Fabulous building, all modern, super duper. Hardly anybody in there. I said to the one guy, he said, well, where's everybody? He lived in Rogerstone. He said, oh, I come up here about once a fortnight. I mean, I think that's the way things are going to progress in the future. I don't necessarily agree with it 100% because I think people are better off in a workplace. Like I said, we mentioned mental health. Even if it's to have a chat about what was on the television last night, I think people need the interaction with other people. And as I said earlier, the novelty is worn off with a lot of people at the beginning. I think a lot of people thought, oh, this is great. You know, I can get up when I want to, log on, do my bit of work. But especially for people living on their own, it is, you know, it is not very good for them. And I think a lot of people like to get back into the workplace. But as I said earlier, the surveys we've done, and I think the majority of people would like to go back into the workplace, but probably not full time. So like I said, we're working on it, and hopefully in the new year, depending on Welsh Government guidelines, we will see what we can do. But at the moment, we are following Welsh Government guidelines. We are opening, as I said earlier, we're open to reopen T Penalty Customer Service Desk shortly. But everything has got to be risk assessed. And that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Colin, and thank you very much to Lynn for your helpful responses to members' queries. Members, the recommendation on this report is at page 27 of our packs. We're asked to note the contents of the report and make comments, and we've made comments prior to recommending the strategy to Cabinet for approval. So can I have someone to move this, please?
I'll move it, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We go to a vote now, then on forms. Thank you.
That's been carried unanimously, Chair. 12 votes for and 0 against and no abstentions.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you, colleagues. Moving on then to item 10 on our agenda, the Employee Wellbeing Strategy 2021 to 2024, and Councillor Colin Gordon will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to consult with the Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee in relation to the Employee Wellbeing Strategy 2021 through to 2024. The Council Team Caerphilly Better Together Transformation Strategy was adopted by Cabinet on the 12th of June 2019. As part of this strategy, 10 corporate reviews have been undertaken to transform how the Council works, and workforce development is one of them. One of the actions of this review is to produce a wellbeing strategy detailing how we will work together to fully support our employees' health and well-being. The Employees' Wellbeing Strategy 21 to 24, attached at Appendix 1, acknowledges that the importance of employee health and well-being has become more widely recognised over the past decade. Employee well-being is critical for business performance. A healthy workplace that promotes a state of contentment benefits both employees and the organisation. Our people are at the very heart of everything we do. Our continuing success as a council will depend on us promoting and facilitating good health and well-being to enable us to provide excellent services to our communities. This employee wellbeing strategy reinforces this. This is an ambitious strategy and comprehensive in content with the clear priorities highlighted. It details how we achieve our vision, working together to fully support our employees' health and well-being. P&R Scrutiny Committee are asked to note the contents of the report and make comments prior to recommending the Employee Wellbeing Strategy 2021 through to 24, attached to Appendix 1, the Cabinet for approval. The recommendation is made to ensure that we have employee wellbeing strategy in place to work with our employees to promote and facilitate good health and well-being, and to provide excellent services to our people. We have taken account of the responses to the employee survey when developing this strategy. GMB, Unison and Unite have been consulted on this strategy. The strategy will be considered at Cabinet tomorrow, and the views of the Scrutiny Committee and its recommendations will be reported verbally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Lynn, would you like to add anything before I invite comment?
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's just to echo what Councillor Gordon has said, but really reflecting on the conversation and the questions that members have had about the last strategy. This employee wellbeing strategy does acknowledge the importance of employee health and wellbeing, and that it has become more widely recognised over the past decade. It also recognises the increasing concern around mental health, the growing pressures that people face living and working in today's world. And also, Chair, it does recognise the ongoing impact of the COVID pandemic and the effect that it may have had on our staff and people generally. Having the strategy in place will ensure that we're able to work with our employees to promote and facilitate their good health and well-being, to support them to undertake their work, and to ensure that we continue to provide excellent services to our community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Members, anyone wish to make a comment or ask a question on this strategy, please? I can't see any hands yet. I'll have a question while I'm waiting. At page 91 of our package, page 10 of the strategy, the staff survey results are looked at. And the lowest scoring response to the questions shown was, for the council is changing how we work for the better, where 25% of respondents, or a quarter of respondents, didn't agree with this statement. Do you know why they didn't agree, or have you considered how to respond to that lack of support for changing the way people work?
Within the survey, Chair, as members will see when we undertake the seminar, there was an opportunity for staff to comment as well, because quite clearly where some of the questions we were asking, we didn't just want a yes or a no answer. You know, for questions like that where there was a no, we wanted to explore it further. We've had some comments. We're able to understand which directorates some of those comments are coming from, and there's some further work that we're undertaking. It's not about trying to identify a member of staff necessarily and what they've said. It's just trying to understand where our staff are saying that perhaps we could improve on something, or perhaps don't agree that something's been done properly, how we can look to improve it by understanding what they're saying. I'm really pleased to say that we had hundreds and hundreds of comments from our staff that we're working through and will continue to work through, because we really want to learn from the survey, from what our staff said, especially when we had such an excellent response to it.
Thank you, Lynn.
So I'm probably not able to give you the specifics, Chair, but
No,
I
wouldn't have wanted the specifics. But it's just that you've taken on board that concern, perhaps, and I'm sure you have. Yes, thank you, Lynn. Any other member want to ask any question or make a comment on the wellbeing strategy, please? I've got no hands showing.
Just got a quick question.
Sorry, Councillor Mann first, and then if you show your hand, I'll know who it is.
Yeah, I couldn't get my hand up, Chair. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Looking at the it's the page after you, page 11. Looking at some of the absence figures there, sickness absence figures. I mean, I think I was told at one time that sickness absence has gone down with people working at home because of the more flexible way they can work. As I think Councillor Gordon mentioned earlier on, that people can, work various parts of the day depending on how they feel or whatever. But there are some, well, you could say quite high, or some people would say very high figures there. And I just wondered if there was any comments maybe from Lynn on that particular situation.
Thank you, Colin. Before I invite Lynn to respond, can I just ask Councillor Sorrells to come in, please?
Yeah, it's just a query on page 92, the reasons for absence. I noticed that they got stressed, non-work related, which is depression, anxiety, right? The full list is there. Don't ask me to pronounce the next one that quickly. But how can we tell that it's non-work related when anybody is suffering from depression and anxiety and stress? There is an element of all your life that creates that situation. So why is it in this report that we specifically say that all the stress is non-work related?
I think in the narrative, if I recall reading, it's explained why it's non-work related, because there is also work-related stress lower down on the listing. But I'm sure Lynn will want to come back on that.
Yeah, well, I did make a comment, pre-meeting as to the extent of the reading that's required in these reports to get a full understanding, with everything that's contained there. So forgive me if that is the case, asking a question that is already answered in the report.
No, it's always a legitimate question. Thank you, Councillor Sorrells. Lynn, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mann's question, if I take that first, if that's okay. There are a number of matters that we've looked into, Councillor Mann. There's nothing coming through that sort of strikes out. What we do have is staff that are reporting absent due to COVID that we didn't have previously. I think we also have to take account of the fact that for a large proportion of the time last year, we had staff shielding. We had staff self-isolating. We had staff absent to look where they had childcare issues, some staff that weren't able to be in work with a risk assessment because we couldn't accommodate the 2 meters required for social distancing. So none of those figures would be in the absences, which may have been as well. So now that shielding and all those other matters have ended, those staff may well be reporting sick, they may not be. But the feedback that we're having from staff, from those working from home, is they do believe the working from home is assisting their well-being and they're not reporting sick as much. What we will continue to do is look for patterns of absence and work with our heads of service and managers. But there is nothing, I've already looked at this for corporate management team, there is nothing that's standing out as an issue really. The only thing is that we're now reporting COVID as an absence, which we weren't clearly at some point in time. And to go back to Councillor Sorrells' question then, Councillor Sorrells is absolutely right. We when somebody has stress, it's very rarely one thing in their life. What we are reporting on is what our staff inform us. Our staff tell us whether it's home or work primarily that's causing them the stress. When it is work-related stress, we have measures and processes we put in place to support them. We will also support them when it is home stress as well. But again, these reports, whether it be home, personal or work-related stress, we are reliant on what our staff advise us in terms of what we report. And my apologies if you could hear my dog then, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Councillor Mann wants to come back in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was one of the things was that that stress issue. I mean, I suppose looking at non-work related as number 1, and then work related as number 7 or 8, depending on which column you look at. You could either be very pleased about that, or you could be very cynical about it. You know, what a lovely time people are having in work, but they're having a very stressful time outside. Now, I know there's all sorts of reasons for stress, and depending on family situations, all the rest of it. But it does seem quite a difference, that large difference between the two types of stress, shall we say.
Thank you, Colin. Okay, no one else wants to speak? No more hands. Okay. We were asked to note the contents of this report and to make comments, which we've done, prior to recommending the strategy to Cabinet for approval. Can I have a mover for the recommendation, please?
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you.
Seconder?
Okay, moved and seconded. Let's go to a vote on this strategy, please. Just waiting for the result.
Yes, that's been carried, Chair. So there's 11 votes for and no votes against and no abstentions.
Thank you, Mark.
I demand a recount, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. On to item 11 on our agenda. Directorate Performance Assessment Year-End Report 2020 to 2021. I think Councillor Gordon is going to introduce.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't really expecting to introduce this one this evening, but so I'll give a brief introduction, and I think Mr. Edmonds will come in then.
Thank you.
Director Performance Assessment Year-End Report 2020 through to 21. The purpose of the report is to present scrutiny with a year-end corporate services performance assessment, which is part of the Council's performance management framework. The performance assessment, referred to hereafter as DPA, is the Directorate's self-assessment and forms part of the Council's overall self-assessment activity. It provides information analysis for the year ending 2020 to 21. Members are invited to discuss, challenge and scrutinise the range of information in the DPA. The Council revised performance framework was endorsed by Cabinet in February 2020, and this report introduces one of the key components of the framework, the Director Performance Assessment, DPA. The DPA is self-assessment of Directorate's progress across a wide range of information types and meets our duty as a principal council to keep our performance under review. The recommendations of 3.1 are: members review the attached document, Appendix 1, and discuss, challenge and scrutinise information.
Your signal's breaking up, Colin. I didn't quite hear that, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Can you hear me better now?
Yep, thank you.
It was just the recommendations. Members review the attached document, Appendix 1, and discuss, challenge and scrutinise the information contained within.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Gordon. Over to Mr. Edmonds, please. If you may, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Chair. In fairness, Councillor Gordon, considering you weren't expecting to introduce that report, you've done a blinking good job of it. So there's not a lot that I will add. Obviously, all the information that members need to scrutinise and challenge is available in the appendix. My director's summary is at the beginning of that, and I think the key point for me to make in advance of taking questions from members is that this is the period that matches the early lockdown and all the months that have gone beyond it. So it is very important that members view this performance and this progress through the lens of the COVID pandemic, because it's encouraging to see progress in spite of all the challenges that have been in front of us as an organisation. Again, that's reflected in the director's summary. And I think, to be honest, there's not much more for me to add other than if you have any questions or comments on what's within the document, now's the time. One further point though, Chair, I know you and I have discussed this, because of the way in which the dashboards are translated into PDFs, what members have got in front of them this evening is to be honest, too small. The font size is very small. So I've asked the performance team if they can consider redoing these dashboards so that when you get the information, it's not quite so small. It is presented in a way that you can engage with it easily, and that's a commitment that I'll make in advance of the next round of these coming forward. But for now, you know, it's been a long meeting. I'll shut up, hand over to you members if you've got any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for taking those steps you just outlined. I appreciate it. The first member who's raised a hand is Councillor Miles, please.
Thank you. It's just two areas that I'd like a little bit more information about. The first one is on page 147 under Resources, Finance and Assets. And I noticed there that corporate finance, the underspend was over £1 million. And not just that it was a large amount, but it was over half of the budget. And that seems like, wow, that's huge. And I wondered if there was anything in particular that would fed into that, why it was quite so big. And then the other query then I've got is on page 149 under the risks, and it's the risk that is connected, 149 is the risk that's connected with the Welsh housing quality standards, and it's been high risk, it's marked red for all of the periods covered in the report. But you know, the commentary there says this is causing big problems. There are 15 people at risk. We're unable to run the service on short-term funding. What, if anything, is the solution to that issue? Can anything be done to mitigate that issue around funding or long-term funding?
Thank you, Brenda. Ed.
Yeah, members, look, there are regular reports brought in front of you as a P&R committee in terms of the budget periods, month 3, month 5, month 7, etc., which will give you a detailed analysis of why that underspend exists. You'll appreciate that during the last financial year, there were quite a number of additional grant streams made available by Welsh Government, which would unnaturally inflate some of those underspends. I think rather than going into any of the detail, if you're comfortable, members, I'll ask Steve Harris for a breakdown of that, and I can share that with you outside of the meeting this evening, so you can identify exactly what the reasons are behind it. So that's the first one. The second one then, in terms of WHQS, Councillor Miles, could you just point me back to the relevant page on the report, because I'm struggling with the page numbers a second.
Yeah,
it's under risks.
The page numbers on the side, so it was page 49 on the side.
Page 149.
Yeah.
Bear with me while I just track this down. The specific risk was...
It's reference...
recruitment problem.
Got you.
PIR 9 funding.
Yeah, thank you, members, for taking the time to get me to the right point in the report. Essentially, what's being highlighted here is that in a number of cases across corporate services, we have staff that are employed to do specific roles, and that funding is available from other funding streams, in this case WHQS, for example. So there are a number of individuals within procurement whose salaries are funded by the WHQS programme. And what's been flagged up here by Liz is that should that programme come to an end, and it will at some point, we will then have a number of staff who aren't funded. So that's a challenge for us to replace that funding and to make sure that the work that's done in procurement can continue. So it's a sensible highlight of the risk at the moment. What we haven't done yet is bring you the information about how we're mitigating that and what the impact might be if of course we're unable to secure replacement funding. But for the moment, whilst it is a high risk, it's not an imminent challenge to us.
Thank you. Anyone else, please? I had a query, Ed, about performance and RAG status. As you'll know, in the report, there are two RAG statuses shown as red, and they relate to data subject rights answered within 30 calendar days, and the second one. So you're familiar with what they are. Can you give us some assurance about where we are on that status now, please?
Yeah, I've had quite a number of conversations with certain councillors on this. You'll appreciate that while we were in COVID response mode, the Information Commissioner in particular was very pragmatic in how they expected councils to resource such queries. I think it's probably fair to say the number of queries that we received in that time didn't necessarily peak any higher than the preceding years. But what we were suffering with is many of our resources, and some of those were from the information governance team, were redeployed to other areas supporting services deemed as critical. So the comments that I've made previously is we wanted to get back to a place where that team was at full capacity, and we've managed to do that. There is still a backlog that we're working through, so that is creating a little bit of a tail for us getting back to our usual high standards. And members will also be aware, I'm sure, that that recently the Information Governance Manager, Joanne Jones, has left the authority for another job, which just at the point at which the team were getting back to full capacity has again created a slight disturbance, for want of a better phrase. Jo's gone on to some bigger and better things, and we wished her well, but we've had to do a little bit of internal reworking to get that team back on track again. So what I would say to members at the moment is this remains high on our list of priorities. The Information Commissioner, whilst being pragmatic to date, will become less pragmatic if we can't resolve this in the near future. And you'll know that before the pandemic, we were very, very good in the way that we met these targets. I've got no concerns at all that we won't get back there in due course. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that assurance, Ed. Councillor Mann, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's back to what I raised earlier, and again, the on the risk register, big red blocks against the sickness absence, and taking into account the COVID situation, I assume when it says we're above the Wales average for local authorities, that obviously is taking into account their COVID situation as well. And obviously there's a concern for the people who are off ill, but it does represent a huge amount of lost opportunity and probably work that is not being done. And excuse me. I also note there's a commitment from the cabinet member and the chief executive. Well, I assume that'll be the replacement chief executive, but to look at the things. But we've been looking for reasons for quite a long time as well, and I'm going before this administration. We have always seemed to perform well, certainly not well against comparable organisations. So I do wonder if there is prospect of making progress. I mean, there certainly needs to be.
Thank you. Ed.
Yeah, look, you'll appreciate, Councillor Mann, we've discussed this on many occasions. This is something that does need to improve. It has been improving. But I think, Lynn and I are looking in detail at the information that sits underneath these measures, and Colin is extremely keen for us to identify some of the things that can be done to improve the situation. What I would say, without wanting to make light of the situation, because this is very, very important, this has been a very unique time. There are a number of additional factors at play during this time frame. And I've also begun to question the extent to which there is variation in the way this information is reported nationally. So I'm very keen to get a feel for whether this is comparing apples with apples or not. And that's something that we'll also explore. We're also looking at a range of policies as a result of the kind of agile working review that's underway at the moment, and sickness absence is one of those areas that we're going to visit. So it's going to take a little bit of time and effort to get underneath this. It'll probably take a little bit of time and effort to start to drive the levels of improvement that we would want to see. But of course, the other item that was before you this evening was the wellbeing strategy, which you have endorsed, and we're very hopeful that that will play its part in driving those numbers down as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just comment? There is appreciate that not everyone reports things exactly the same, but I would like to think, Ed, that we are getting reasonably reliable figures, if not more, from the likes of Data Cymru. And as I say, maybe with the exception of Ceredigion in the earlier days and possibly Pembrokeshire, most authorities were experienced quite substantial levels of COVID. So, you know, there is a question there that needs to be answered, really. I mean, and we just haven't performed well for far too long, really.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Morgan, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not actually a question. It's just a comment to say that I find this report astonishingly good reading. I certainly didn't expect it to be as good reading as this. And I think that this is a reflection of just how hard, something we were talking about earlier, the amount of hours that officers were putting in during the beginning of the pandemic, and this report covers that period. It's quite astonishing that we're in as good a position as this, and I would just like to thank the officers and the people who work within our organisation that we are in this. You know, when we see in green and amber and very little red, when we've just gone through a pandemic, is quite astonishing. So congratulations to everyone.
Well, welcome remarks, Sean. And I'm sure the whole committee would agree with that, and I'll ask Ed to pass that on to the teams. Thank you very much.
I will do that. Thanks both. Thanks, members.
Anyone else before we move on, please? No other hands. The recommendations on page 133 of our packs. We're asked to review the document, discuss, challenge and scrutinise the information it contains, and that we've done. Thank you to Ed. That's the end of our agenda. My thanks to officers, cabinet member and committee members for their contributions today. Can we just confirm, please, that recording of our proceedings has stopped?
No.